welcome to another episode of the Mad and Crip Theology podcast. It is so nice to be here with y'all today. So today, Laura, Shauna, and Eliana and I are going to be having a chat about what is inclusive pedagogy when we're thinking about teaching with Mad and Crip people in our communities. And Miriam's away today, so she will be missed, and so is Wendy. They both had some stuff that they had to take care of. So as we're starting up, I'm just going to give a couple of announcements. This has been working well for us, I think, over the past few episodes, and it helps to keep us organized here as well, or me, at least me organized. So I just want to make a couple of announcements. So the Mad and Crip Theology Press is still looking for contributions to our upcoming volume entitled Joyful Hard Work, Everyday Stories of Caregivers. So if you are a person who gives care to someone with disabilities and or mental illness, we would love to hear from you. Or if you know somebody who does that, who's done that for you, we would love to connect with them. And they can always email us if they have questions or like anything or want to chat about ideas. We love working with first-time authors too, so please don't feel like you have to be fancy. None of us are fancy here at the press. So you can email us at madandcriptheology@gmail.com. Okay. And if you want to check out the call for content for that, it's at madandcriptheologypress.ca. And I also want to give a more global call for content this morning as well. The press is looking for some manuscripts. We want to start publishing books, and so if you have a book idea, please get in touch with us. And you can check out our featured disciplines on the press website at madandcriptheologypress.ca. Just go to the About tab and you can see kind of what we're looking for. And please don't limit yourself. Like if you're an artist or storyteller, we would really, or like you have a kid's book idea, or like anything, just drop us a line. And the final announcement that I have today is the new issue of the journal, the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health and Disability, will be out in November, knock on wood. Probably by the time this episode airs, it will already be out. So you can go check that out. And that one's on Mad and Crip sexuality. And we are looking for contributions for our spring issue of the journal, which is going to be on caregiving and care receiving. So if you're interested in writing something, you have like art or storytelling or other things, if you're doing research in this area, we would love to hear from you. So that was a lot of announcements. So thanks for listening to that. So I think what we'll do now is we will get into our conversation, our roundtable talk about inclusive pedagogy. So this conversation comes out a little bit of, at least for me, when I think of this, I think of like how much non-inclusive pedagogy I have experienced in my life. So I'm probably going to be kind of talking about some of that stuff today, and I'm really interested to hear what everybody else wants to share about this topic. I think most of us have done teaching at colleges and universities, and so it'll be interesting to hear what everybody has to say. So is there anybody who would like to kick us off today and bring a question to the group, or maybe share a story about inclusive pedagogy?
I can start and talk a little bit about a class I taught last year, and some of the ideas about how we taught the class and how we hope to teach the class. We weren't able to actually run it exactly how we wanted because of the pandemic, but we hope that, I think in future, we might be able to expand how we run the class. So last year, I should say, I taught a course on embodied knowledge, embodied theological knowledge, essentially. How do we know stuff? And I was really interested, particularly in areas of spirituality, where what we know is often something we can't always express with words and ideas. Because really, when you get down to it, how do you know God? How do you talk about God? It's pretty limited when we try to confine it only to words and ideas, which is how universities often work. And this idea of talking about our spirituality without expanding how we experience and communicate spirituality seemed a bit circular to me, or problematic. So I actually co-taught a course with an expressive arts facilitator. So we would talk about themes within spirituality or knowledge or theology, but then we would integrate various artistic experiences. And again, it wasn't about what we were producing, the actual art output. It was the experience of creating art and how that connected to experiencing the divine, or having some sort of connection with the divine. Our ultimate goal is actually to co-teach this class, or to teach this class alongside people with intellectual disabilities who take on leadership roles, so that and it's not that they're visitors, they are members of the class, and they join the class and engage in the class and offer leadership as well. And what really started me going down this path was the leadership of my own son, who experienced sort of his own spirituality in ways that necessarily weren't always ways that I understood it, as someone who tends to hang out in my head. And so these are some pedagogical strategies that I'm playing with in courses I teach, in terms of trying to get us, particularly in conversations around spirituality, trying to sort of get us out of our head, and explore ideas in other ways, in particular through embodiment, and sort of experiences of the senses. Yeah, so that's something I'm playing with. And we weren't able to bring in community members because of COVID last year. The hope is we will do that in future years. But last year, the co-taught class with an expressive arts facilitator was amazing. And as someone who teaches pedagogically, sort of watching how students are making connections and how ideas are coming alive in new and creative ways, it was cool to witness, and it was cool to be part of. So that's my bit of my story.
That sounds so cool, Laura. And I remember every time you talk about this class, I like really want to take it. So it sounds amazing. Um, I wonder, I was just thinking as you were talking, what were sort of like the ways how did you invite people with intellectual disabilities to come and be a part of the class? What was the process of that? Just in case some of our listeners might be interested in doing something similar.
Yeah, so our hope originally had been that a group of people with intellectual disabilities would join for the entire semester and would be members of the class, and would bring their own unique gifts and leaderships and help us really experience this together. Because of COVID, we weren't able to do that. So what we did was we did connect with community members of the community throughout the semester, in particular L'Arche. And the Spirit Movers spent some time with us and offered an in-service on dance and music via Zoom. So really, there was a lot more of connecting to friends in the community, people who are doing this kind of stuff in the community, and bringing them into classes to share their expertise with the class. We hope to do it a little bit differently in the future, but really it was just, going out in the community and hanging out with lots of different people, and then inviting them to join your class. That was a lot of what I did.
Oh, that's so cool. And we look forward to hearing more about if you're able to do that in the future, have people come, more people come anyway. Um After COVID, hopefully we're like almost done with COVID. So yeah. So thank you so much for that, Laura. Eliana, what about you? I'm really interested to hear because you're living in Korea, in South Korea. You've moved back after your time in Canada. So what's it like in South Korea? Um, and how do you think about inclusive pedagogy there?
I've taught some classes in homiletics, preaching. So in Korea, in Korea background, there's so many men. There's last Monday, just one woman in the class. Without that woman, and the rest of them are men. So in that case, I thought how to like draw her experience and her her opinion without ignoring like how can I say ignoring dichotomy conversation. Like in Korea, there's not good how can I say perspective at feminism. I don't know why, but we started in a not healthy way. So it is hard to say about like a woman's perspective to interpret Bible. So I should have some kind of should have done some kind of way to bring out her experience as a one of a conversation. So I started to give a chance to everyone to say something. It was in a really small way, but I think language and the chance to speak are the part of the power. I think the really big authority, especially like from my experience. I'm not a how can I say, I'm not a native speaker in English, and my pronunciation and my grammar was not perfect. So when I was in class, I always like nervous when I speak English. So I feel like I don't want to say it like in that way, but please like understand my narrow ability to explain. I feel like disabled to speak something and disabled to like converse what I think and what I feel. So in that class, I got so many stress because it was hard to express something in my heart. So I especially in a big group, and especially in a the conversation about like North American culture, I could not I feel like I cannot be included. I cannot be included in that conversation, even in that class as a being itself. So I was weighted like something something kind of a chance to speak out my opinion. I couldn't do myself. So like for me, inclusive way of teaching maybe related to the power of language and power of chance to speak. So everyone has like ethics of listening. We need to like develop ethics of listening and the sense of compassion. So I wanted to like feel I am not alone, and everyone wants to listen to what I say. So I tried to that student, the only one woman, can feel like, oh, I am not alone in that class, and everyone wants to hear my voice. That's why I just gave her a chance to speak and respect her opinion and show my ethics of listening. And I of course, I asked the old people in that class, we need to have like ethics of listening, even though like we do not want to listen, like radically speaking, like we do not interested in that issue, but we need to listen because it is a way of like inclusive, making an inclusive class.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Eliana. I love the idea of the ethics of listening. I was wondering when you were talking, when you were in the class and you were finding it difficult to formulate some of your ideas and speak, do you wish that the professor would have called you to speak, like invited you to say something, or would that have put more pressure on you and made it more stressful? Like I wonder sometimes, like when I'm teaching, like for the quiet ones, I try to say like, oh, I'd really love to hear from somebody who hasn't had a chance to speak yet, because some of, what happens in class with the dynamics, it's like the pecking order, and there's some students who talk a lot too much, and then there's the quiet ones. So would that have, something like that have helped, or would that have stressed you out more? I just wonder.
Thank you for asking that issue, because many people asked me the same question. So whenever I got that question, I would ask like, you please ask something to the quiet people, because that itself can be a chance to like reject or accept. Without this question, that quiet people never get the kind of chance. And if they feel like, oh, my teacher or my class wanted to like my opinion, I can raise up my hand, and or someday or some chance, or I can express my opinion. So I think that asking the how can I say, the question can be a way to like draw their opinion in that class, and inclusive way of teaching, I think.
Yeah, and I know myself, I'm one of the quiet ones, so I need people to like pull out stuff when I have social anxiety. So like speaking in a group is like one of my worst nightmares. And so yeah, I do appreciate it when teachers will take time to remember the quiet ones. So yeah. Shauna, what about you? What were you thinking of sharing today about pedagogy?
Yeah, thank you, Eliana, for what you said right there. It kind of, before I move on to something else, I'd love to speak about this for a second. I'm also one of the quiet ones in a group. And I had one professor in my master's who would kind of wait until the whole conversation of the class had like done its thing, and it had like risen up and kind of come back down. And then before moving on, she would say, oh, Shauna, and she would name 2 or 3 people and said, before we move on, is there anything else that you would like to say? And always with this kind of air of, you can say pass or you can enter in. And almost without fail, every time all of us 2 or 3 would offer something, and then we would move on. And I think that could be, depending on the energy and the vibe from the front of the classroom, that could be a really like, whoa, like Shauna, say something before we're done, or it can feel the way that it did in that classroom, which was this invitation to those, like I'm not one to like fight to get my opinion in there. I just don't have the energy. I don't really, care that much to fight my way into a conversation that's happening. And those who know me know that I have many opinions on just about every topic, but I don't always fight to get my word in. And I think in some ways, I've been in other classrooms where I've been asked afterwards, like, you need to speak up. But just because of the energy and the vibe in the classroom and how it's set up, I just would never, even if I was offered a chance, probably say, say anything. Because in different ways it's safe or unsafe, you know, for me in those moments to say something. And I notice especially this in classrooms where, in theological classrooms where there's fewer women. That happens a lot. So thank you for bringing all of that up, Eliana. I was thinking in our topic for today, I was thinking about a lot of my friends and conversations that I've had with friends over our academic careers, and kind of the nuts and bolts of even a syllabus, the way that a syllabus is set up, the assignments are set up. In particular, I was thinking about a friend of mine who lives with ADHD and has deadlines are really difficult. So to get up to, like, almost as if like they needed the stress of a deadline to get going. And the ways I started thinking about the ways that we are kind of catalyzed into our work, what energizes us to even start the process, how does that process go, and then how does it end? And just the onus often is on the student to say, I need this from you to make it work for me. And I feel like we're often so tired with advocating for ourselves, and that it's like, again, it's like, okay, now I need to explain this whole thing to someone else to make this process actually something that I can engage with and get something out of and learn, and to offer our own wisdom to other folks in the classroom and to our professors. So that's kind of where I went with it this last couple of weeks, thinking about the question is, how do we, in the nuts and bolts of even our deadlines and how we ask assignments to be submitted, and how they're graded, how does that whole process go, and how can we make that more accessible and friendly and catalyzing for the work and the wisdom that's already there? So those are kind of some of the questions I've been thinking about, and yeah, wonder what y'all think, and if there's any strategies that you've used that don't require someone to, especially in a big classroom, step in and say with extra energy and extra gumption to say like, okay, I need this and I need to explain to you why, and how can we just make that a part of what we do?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's interesting. As you were talking, Shauna, I was thinking like I try to be like, I kind of maybe like overfunction a little bit in like asking people, do you need any accommodation? Like in my class, like I'm like, is there anything I can do? Like I really want to try to be there for people. And I find depending on the class, like Shauna and I had a big group this past summer, teaching a class at a manual college, and it was like, I sent out an announcement. I told them 50 times in class. Like I was like, come on, guys, if you need anything, just let me know. And nobody came forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but this is a class on mental health. There must be folks in the room that need stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the summer before, when I had a smaller group in class, like half of them came forward and said, I need XYZ. So I was able to work with them, and like a couple of them submitted assignments, like instead of writing, because writing was horrible for them, they were able to submit assignments, like they recorded stuff and sent it to me, like a podcast and different things like that. But I wonder like if I was thinking, Shauna, but what you're saying, maybe it is too much on people to like have to explain to me, again, this is what I need and this is why. And I think accessibility services, at least at U of T, is like so burdensome and so inaccessible, if you ask me. There's so many hoops you have to jump through, and it takes so much energy. So I find a lot of students don't even bother getting an accessibility advisor, and like, because you have to go to your doctor who has to sign papers, and then you have to go here and there, and it's like, oh my God, it's like a part-time job just trying to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, those things cost money sometimes too, all the doctor's notes you have to get, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I worry. I agree with you. And this was a conversation we had actually just had this week here where I teach. And the worry is that or a concern of mine is that there seems to be this sort of default assumption that students are trying to play the system and make it easier on themselves or not do the work. When in fact, to have those accommodations requires an inordinate amount of work often. I know I'm really trying to think about, and your idea of podcasts and diverse ways of demonstrating knowledge are really helpful. I think I want to add podcasts because that's not one of my potential deliverables in a course. But I've been trying to think of how do people acquire knowledge and demonstrate knowledge, which is why I've also been thinking about the embodiment piece, because we're so programmed to read and think and write, and maybe for undergraduates have an exam, answer a question correctly. And so I've been trying to create as many options as I can think of for sort of course summative assignments, so that students can demonstrate an acquisition of knowledge and experience of learning in diverse ways. My courses are all experiential, so they spend time in the community or they spend time with an expressive arts facilitator. There's always an experiential component that is integrated completely into the course. But some of the deliverables in my course can be things like, yes, they can write a classic paper, but they can do a film study, they can do a book study, they can create art, they can write poetry, they have to connect it to the course in some meaningful way, but the idea is that knowledge is not just in a scholarly paper with appropriately cited Chicago references. And how do we make sure that students with diverse learning abilities can demonstrate that learning is something I've been really trying to think about. Yeah, so I thank you for the podcast idea.
Yeah, no worries. I've heard mixed reviews from students who had to do like a full-on podcast though. Like if it was like, you can write a paper basically, but say it out loud as a podcast, a lot of them said it was way too much work. So with this particular student who I was working with, they actually have a podcast. So they had all of their like fancy equipment already set up. And so it was very easy for them to just like do their weekly journal entries that I have for that class via voice. So and it was good for me because I would just like do other things and listen to their journal for that week. So it was kind of fun. I don't know if I should maybe like for next year get them all to do that. Because I know Wendy was telling me a couple weeks ago, when she works with in one of her classes as a TA, they give all the feedback for papers as comments, oral comments that they like record, and then the students are able to access that through the U of T like webpage where all their graded assignments are. So they're like, hey, Shauna, great work. Just wanted to say you should have worked on your thesis statement a little bit more, blah, 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 blah. And they said it's way faster for them. And the students feel kind of like they're having a conversation with the instructors. So I thought that was a very cool idea too.
Yeah, and then you get the tone of voice and the energy with which it is offered as well, that's really cool. I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, I know I'm one of those people that always reads comments as being either disappointed or angry. So I think that would be very nice to have a non-disapproving voice encouraging you with your work. So yeah. Maybe I'll just offer a quick thought about some of my own experience of like going through the gong show that is like trying to get accommodations. I think one thing that I would really encourage, I have two ideas. So the first one is I really needed a note taker when I was going through my PhD because I get like really bad migraines, right? So sometimes like I either can't come to class or I find it difficult while I'm in class to like write things and look at white paper, which is like the worst color for me while sitting under fluorescent lighting, which gives me migraines. So it was like literally I never found a note taker, even though accessibility services would literally advocate for me and ask my professors to get one for me, which would just be like a person in the class who would share their notes with me. No student the entire time that I went through my PhD like class time or coursework ever volunteered. So what I would usually get was an email from the professor saying, I can't find a note taker, so basically you're shit out of luck. So I would really encourage, if there's teachers listening to this, just get a note taker for your class just generally, and get them to just upload their notes to class website at the end of every class. It's not extra work for them. They're already taking notes. They can just like literally take a picture of their notes with their cell phone camera and just quickly upload it, right? Then everybody's kind of covered. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I've heard some like grumpy comments from professors about having to advocate for or having to accommodate students. And Laura, you kind of alluded to that earlier, I think, on the podcast today. But you know, this idea that it's extra work. It's so much extra work for me to have to meet with a student. It's so much extra work for me to have to email their accessibility advisor. Like, I think what I'd like to say is like, that's your job as a teacher, to meet with the accessibility advisor and also like find pathways for your students so that they can succeed in your class. And like, I really want to put my money where my mouth is and try to do that as much as I can. But you know, like the administrative part of like answering emails or like maybe having to meet with a student one-on-one is like doable, I think. Even if you have just like a short meeting with them, 5 or 10 minutes on Zoom, meet with them. Like, they need your help. And you never know how much like you going out of your way to care for them will mean to them. Because every time I got, I can't find you a note taker, so I don't know what to do email, I just felt like more and more discouraged. It was like, oh, you know, if I do need to miss class or something, I don't know anyone in the class, so what am I gonna do? So anyway, oh, and okay, and the second idea that I have, just to like end off my rambling, is if you have a note taker, what you could do also is offer them like a certificate or something at the end of the class, just saying that they were like an awesome like an awesome helper to the class, that they could put on their CV, right? It would, I don't know like what you would necessarily call it, like a, like, you don't have to use the language of note taker, but something, and then you could give it to them, and yeah, they could put it on their CV to show that they were like doing some like, it's kind of like community work, right? You're helping the community of learning so that everybody can be involved. And I heard that idea from somebody who came in and did a presentation on mental health and teaching, and I thought that is so cool. I really want to start trying to do that, so you're like recognizing the student for their hard work.
Yeah, I totally agree with Amy's Amy's opinion, because like many times when I could not understand, or I could not catch what the instructor said, I was so like stressed out. How do I figure out this situation? And then it was hard to like ask other people, like, show me your note or something like that. So yeah, your idea is quite helpful to like many international students. And add on your idea, for international students, the issue of editing is really, really, really important to submit our paper, because I think no instructor, wants to get, you know, some like messed up grammar paper. So its editing is really important. Like I feel like editor is one of my, how can I say, like not, you know, the less than soulmate, but you know, writing partner to me. I've experienced like twice my editor without any, like, how can I say, previous announcement, just rejected to edit my paper. So I was so so frustrated. How can I figure out this, because the submission due is coming out. So editor you know, as I know, U of T has some kind of editor for students, but you know, international student, it's not enough. It's not enough because so many international students need their editor, but the, you know, the number of editors quite, you know, limited. And then you know, in the accommodation issue, there's no like extension for international students. We have like, no, we international students must have the time to edit. They finish it, not they finish it like at least a week ahead of like, you know, submission due, because they need the editing time. So I think class editor quite would be quite good idea for like, or accommodation, or like inclusive way to teaching. And one more idea, no, not idea, but I really worried about the mental health of an instructor and TA, because you know, as Amy said, and many teachers said, like we need kind of how to set our boundary. We need kind of a strategy because we cannot accept all, you know, that kind of issue and complication. I witnessed Amy's hardship when I worked with her. Like she was not a, you know, personal counselor, but some student asked her like their personal hardship. I totally understood their situation, but I really worried about, you know, Amy's mental health. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Eliana. Oh, I didn't know you were worried about me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Eliana and I worked together. I think it was in one of the really big cohort classes, maybe like 2 years ago, I think, at Emmanuel. And yeah, it's interesting. I think as we're growing as teachers to learn what our job is, and have sort of those multiple hats when you need to meet with people to talk to them about what's going on in their lives. Yeah. Yeah, especially when you're working, you know, a lot of people who take the classes that we teach have a lot of lived experience of the stuff that we're teaching about. So yeah. Thanks for those observations, Eliana. I know we had talked before at Emmanuel about having a like a group of PhD students who offer their editing services like as another community gift, you know, to give to the community of learning of editing. And I wonder if that's something that might you know, materialize in the future. Yeah. And Eliana, for your idea of having a class editor, would you want to have like students like switch papers and like do a copy edit, like go through and check for grammar and spelling and stuff? Is that what you were thinking? Like partnering or something?
Yeah, it's not a whole idea like a writing supervisor. It's just correcting grammar and awkward bubble issue, something. Yeah, that would be, you know, really helpful. That looks simple, but really helpful.
Okay, yeah, I like that idea. That's cool. We're getting a lot of good ideas today.
I'll just add a quick one about note-taking that I actually heard of this week here at Laurier. We also I am also often asked to find a note taker for class, and our Accessible Learning Center has strategies, and that has proved helpful and useful. But one of the things that the Accessible Learning Center proposed, which really intrigued me, was an idea of most of us use online learning platforms. So we use My Learning Space here at Laurier, having simply a whiteboard or a note board where students can share class notes, just any student. So you don't have to be the formal class note taker, but if you're willing to share your notes or even just observations or thoughts during the class, would you be willing to put them in this community folder essentially? And one of the they noted that one of the things it does is it really does create a strong sense of community, particularly among smaller classes. And I thought that was a really great idea as well. It's something I'd like to explore trying. It's a collaborative, supportive endeavor that everyone is trying to help everyone else learn. And I also like the idea that it makes learning less competitive, which it can be in the university setting.
Yeah, that's so true. It can be very, very competitive. Shauna, did I see it? Were you gonna say something? I thought I saw an idea pop up there, or was I? Am I wrong?
No, I was just thinking back to a class where we kind of shared our notes on a Google Doc, because the way that the class was set up was was more a seminar style, and there was two kind of groups that took on different questions every week, or it was every day. It was an intensive, I think. So in the evening we would go home and we would all write up, and there was a list of questions, and we would all do kind of simultaneous research and then add to the document as we went. And then at the end too, we had all the research done by our colleagues from the other half of the questions. So not only did we get to talk about it in class, but we also got this kind of running documents, and I still have them, of like all of that information. So yeah, even in class, people can be writing their notes into a Google Doc. I don't know. I think that's really interesting to think about how to use it.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I use Google Doc. I'm kind of obsessed with Google Docs, but I use them more for like just like referring the students to documents. And I've had them do some collaborative work on Google Docs before, and it's so fun to see like all of their little bubbles pop up at the top of the Google Doc and everybody typing. It's so cool. It's like such a great experience to see that. But yeah, I really like that idea, Shauna, of like a collaborative doc that you use during class. And I experienced something like that when I went to a couple of workshops. Oh, the name of the crip camp. I went to some of the crip camp stuff, and they did that as well. So it was like simultaneous document. Like they had like a document of like pre-published of like what the person was going to be talking about who was presenting, plus everyone was invited to go on and add notes. So it was really fun. It was like everybody collaborating. Yeah,
You can even add questions, and yeah, anyways. Yeah, there's lots to do with it. I think that would be cool.
yeah. Well, I'm aware of time. I know some of us have to go today, so I'm wondering if anybody has any last thoughts that they'd like to share about pedagogy today. Well, I think this is a great conversation, and I think maybe this could be part one of a series that we do or something over the next year. I know Laura had said she has some colleagues who may be able to come and share some of their wisdom with us too around this topic. So this is part one. And I just want to say thank you so much to Laura, Shauna, and Eliana for being here today. Our social experiment is continuing. We are doing this in the morning again. And Eliana, we just thank you so much for coming on, because it's like 12:30 a.m. where you are. So thank you so much for giving us your evening this evening and staying up to come and talk to us. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Amy.
You.
Yes, thank you.